Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. I'm Mary Crean, and I'm here today with a couple of my co-hosts. Really, today I'm going to say that the band's all back together. So, Laura, how are you doing today?
You know, I'm doing well, Mary. I'm happy to be back having these interesting and insightful conversations.
And Joseph, how are you doing?
Good. I'm great. Good to be here with you guys, gals. Looking forward to today.
All right. Well, let's kick it off and introduce our amazing guest.
Sure thing, Mary. Welcome to the show. Sarah Barr is an Emmy-nominated journalist and award-winning public relations expert who is now the CEO and founder of her own company, WashAshore Writing. She raises the profile of individuals and organizations to create an image to remember and words to treasure. Welcome, Sarah.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for being
you so
here.
much. Yeah, I feel like the gang is all here. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Sarah, why don't you start off by telling us more about your business and your story?
Well, I'll start with my story because that kind of leads up to the business because it's been an evolution. I like to joke that I've reinvented myself more times than Madonna. I actually started out as a dancer, classical ballet and modern dance. And then from a sense of performing as a dancer to the performance of a journalist, I had a 20-year career in television news, and I worked in many, many markets, and I got to finish my career in my home, Hartford, Connecticut. From there, though, I went into public relations, first in government and politics, and then corporate communications. And then I had to hit a pause, step off that merry-go-round, and I started my own business, WashAshore Writing.
Now, for those of us out here who are wondering, and I know I can't be alone, tell us more about that name. It's very interesting.
If you have lived on or you're from an island community or a beach community, you're the native, but people who move in, they are WashAshores. And it's pretty prominently used on Martha's Vineyard, but I am a WashAshore and I am proud of it. Also, I love the beach. Yeah, I also love the beach. So I do some of my best thinking just walking the beach. So it's kind of inspirational and aspirational.
Some messages in a bottle, I'm sure, right?
Yep, even in the driftwood.
I did like your tagline. I don't have it in front of me anymore, but messages,
image
to treasure,
to remember, words to treasure. Okay, yeah.
I got the gist. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what that means, like how you do that work and why you chose to do this work at this point in your career.
Yeah, I'm a person who doesn't like to be pigeonholed. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way, especially when they reach a certain point in their career. What I have done is taken the best of everything that I've enjoyed doing or I feel that I'm good at. And the common denominator, if you're doing it as a math problem, is that I like to communicate, whether it's through the performance arts or through the written word. And there's different ways of communicating. There's different ways of presenting your best self. So I do everything from writing those press releases to writing resumes and bios. I do media training with people. I have found a sweet spot with working with people in transition. And transition can happen at any time in life. It could be the college graduate who says, okay, I got my degree, but I got to get my first job. How do I do that? That's that fork in the road. Another time could be, I want to get that promotion. I'm doing well, but I want to get to that next step. That's a fork in the road. It could be, I need a new job, or it could be my third act. Here I am. Now what do? I always wanted to do this. How can I pivot and do that? Those are the type of people that I enjoy working with. I work with so many up and down the East Coast. and actually nationally, especially with resume writing and things like that. I'm a storyteller, and there's different ways to tell that story. And if I can help people tell that story, whether it's where to look for the camera, or how to write that resume, or what to wear in the interview, it makes a big difference with people and how they present themselves. And I like helping people feel and present their best self.
So I love that. And Sarah, on our program, Prime Life, we're focusing on maybe that third act. Can you talk a little bit about those individuals that perhaps you've assisted that are in that point in their life, and of how your work has culminated good transitions for them, and talk a little bit about the experience that they've had and shared with you?
The third act folks, they always get the question of, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's the hardest question for me to ask them, and it's the hardest question for them to answer, because so many times they are going back to, I used to do this, I used to love to paint, or I used to, whatever, something that they really did from the heart and from the soul. And they ended up going a different track, whether it be for family reasons, for monetary reasons, whatnot. But a lot of people go back to those roots. And if they can answer that question to themselves honestly, and so many people have who I've worked with, it makes a huge difference. But if they kind of keep saying, oh, I got one more job in me, then, I'm trying to get them to a point where they're feeling something from the heart and that they feel that they can give something. A lot of people have transferred their expertise to board work. A lot of people have gone back to school to get that degree to do something else. And whatever I can do, there's zillions of stories, but I want to help them tell their story so that they can take that next step.
So let's talk about some tips, right? So it's interesting. There's a lot of talk around storytelling. It's content creation. It's the form of the written word, or, you give the example of dance in your earlier journeys. But we consume content in very, very many ways quite often. And some of it's hectic, some of it's great, some of it's true, some of it's not. And the space that you're working within, what are some tips that you can give to folks? Let's say it's an individual who is working on identifying the next stop in their professional journey. What are some things that they could do to help set themselves up for that presentation, so they're walking in or providing that strongest?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders, and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau Insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Forward.
I'm really glad you asked that question, because the answer, and you're going to laugh at me, but the answer is very simple. Breathe. Don't forget to breathe.
Yeah.
It's that inhale and exhale. It will help you through no matter what you're trying to do, either present yourself, write something, whatever that content or form of communication will be. When you breathe, literally the inhale and the exhale, that pause, it's a moment of clarity. And it may seem like, oh, all right, I have to answer that question. I should answer it right away. But if you inhale, exhale, you calm yourself down, you slow yourself down, you really think things through, your voice lowers. You're not talking up here, you know what I mean? You don't sound nervous. You don't sound really fast, when you're speaking and trying to make the right answer. You just pause. And it's not only good for presenting yourself for an interview or at work or for a presentation, whatnot, it's good to remember that in life, I find. And they say living in the present, whatnot, but it really is breathing and stepping through and taking it one moment at a time. I have worked with so many people who have gone onto television for the first time to do an interview. It's like, like if they're a financial person or something, your stuff. But to know TV, breathe. And one woman who had never been on TV before, she was a client in Rhode Island, and she used that breathing technique. She said, Sarah, I don't know what I said, but I just remembered you told me to breathe, and that got me through those. And it was a 4-minute interview. It wasn't a short, 30-second interview. So breathe.
That's why they record those things so they can watch what they said after. It's interesting you talk about breathing. There was an article recently, I think it was in the Journal, Wall Street Journal, about the power of silence. And it was about that very thing. Take a breath.
Take a breath
before answering a question. Take a breath before getting into an argument. Whatever it is, that breath moment.
Right. And that's actually a good point, because you don't want to say something wrong because you can't take it back.
See, I told you that, Mary. Don't do that. You also, you're talking about helping the third act folks tell their story. I'm also a communications person.
Okay.
And a different article I read about the question people get asked all the time. Well, what do you do? Right? So when you stop working, what do you do could be a very nerve-wracking question. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you help people answer a question like that when they're going through that transition or trying to tell their story to a new audience or go in a new direction.
Yeah, and the question that people often do, it's like, yeah, what do you do now? Or just tell me about yourself. And people just trip up. So it's really reflection before you go into that situation where someone's going to be talking to you. And it may sound like a canned answer, or you may feel like it's a canned answer, but to someone else who's hearing it for the first time, they're really interested. So one is be honest, but two, just don't go blah, 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 blah. Don't ramble. Just have a couple quick sentences. And this is who I am, and this is what I do. As someone who's an emerging screenwriter, and I know we'll probably talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but that's something that when someone has to do a pitch, that's the question that trips them up. Tell me about yourself. And so I like to prepare my clients with that. One, breathe. Two, if you're really feeling nervous, grip your toes in your shoes, because no one's going to see you taking tension in your feet. It takes it away from your face, right? Free tips here, right? And then just keep it to 2 or 3 sentences and never answer more than what you're asked. I think that's a huge, huge thing. Never answer more than. So I don't want to make it feel like a deposition, but that keeps the conversation going.
I think that's interesting. Don't ever answer more than what you're asked. So you opened up the door, so I'm going to push it open a little bit as it relates to your screenwriting, because when you and I had lunch many, many months ago, you shared that with me, and I didn't know that about you. So please share with our audience, how you came to that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Was it a lifelong dream? I think it was when we chatted, if I recall correctly.
It's something that I've wanted to do for a while. And finally it was, and my late husband even said this. He goes, don't just say you're going to do it. Promise me you're going to do it. And I'm on screenplay number 5. No one's bought anything yet, but I'm still writing. That's the important thing. And it's another form of writing. It's another form of expression, but I'm a huge movie freak. But how can I contribute? And I can contribute as a storyteller. And I can contribute by telling stories that I feel aren't being represented on the screen. I lean towards edgy dramas, and they have a woman protagonist, and that woman is 40 plus. And I don't see a woman who is smart, knows what she's doing, and knows how to handle herself on the screen enough. So I'm going to write them.
Well, thank you for that, because as someone who likes to watch that type of content, I appreciate it. And you're right, you don't see enough of that, enough of the reality on the screen, if you will. So you said something interesting. How can I contribute? And I think that's a concept that people may or may not ask themselves throughout different pieces and parts of their journey. And you said you contribute as a storyteller. And it sounds like that's one of many ways that you contribute. Because how could people help identify their contribution? Right? Only recently was I able to put into words the things that I feel like I contribute, whether it's on a personal level or a professional level, the things I always circle back to, or what I find myself contributing. Do you have any words of advice for someone who understands that they love to do certain activities, or they always work in a certain type of organization, but they may not have been able to identify what it is that they contribute? Is there anything that you can help them kind of think through that to help identify that process?
Well, it is the thinking through. That's the key phrase. And how I said, oh, I was a dancer, and then how did I find that performance element, but still disseminate information and that, common denominator? I look at it as putting together a pearl necklace, and I'm stringing together all those pearls. And so I would help someone think through, what are the pearls? What did you like about each step, each phrase? If you were to write a letter to yourself from your younger self and read it later, what are the things that are the constants? And for me, it's been writing. For me, it's been communicating. For other people, they'll have their own thing. But for someone who loves to help people, they may continue to volunteer, or they may say, hey, I'm Mary. I can get the band back together here and pull everyone together. That sort of thing. If you're an organizer, play up to those strengths. So it kind of goes back to think about what you can contribute by what's been consistent and how can I take that to the next level. But have a plan. Don't do what I did.
Take a breath and
create a breath, make a plan.
Just continuing on that thought, what you were just describing, people think of themselves in a very specific way, right? This has been my career, sort of like the question I asked earlier, like, what do you do? But they think of themselves as tied to their career or some part of themselves. How do you get people to kind of take that step back so they can see the forest through the trees and really say, you know what? You're much bigger than just that job, or you're much bigger than just that volunteer work, or whatever that one thing might be for that person.
This is where the resume writing has really helped me, because it's the transitional skills. Don't identify with the job. If someone says, well, like just say they're going off to college and the only job that they had is at a coffee shop, I say, no, that's customer service expertise. It's not the coffee shop. It's the transitional skill that you can take from point A to point B to point Z. And if you can identify 3, 4, 5 of those, you're well on your way. And one of those questions that you should be asking yourself is, what kind of leader are you? Some people will say, oh, I'm a collaborative leader. Some people may answer it, I'm a servant leader. Whatever it is, you be that. And share an example of how you're that.
So for those that are maybe a little bit, on in years, and they do have a lot in their resume and they're trying to almost pull back and talk about themselves more in a high level, what kind of guidance do you give to someone like that? Because I know there are some core functionalities within a resume, but for those, because we talk about this all the time on our program, people retire and then they unretire, or they do finally get the courage to say, I was doing this XYZ and now I want to write in calligraphy. So Laura, I'm looking at you because you mentioned that the other day. So kind of how do you approach an older adult?
I will stick with the transitional skills because those are the core competencies. Those carry you through, and you can take them to board work. You can take them to volunteerism. You can take them to a total 180 because those are constants. But I'll also go back to have a plan. If you have a side hustle, then start leaning into that side hustle to help you make that pivot, because that's something that brings you joy. I didn't have the luxury when I made my change, but that's okay. The other thing is you may be making a change, but also be prepared not to make money. Because when businesses start up, a lot of people will go through their savings or not be able to get as many jobs as they thought, if they're a sole proprietor. So be prepared for that, but also be persistent with that. When I first started out, things weren't, jumping on, people weren't coming my way all of a sudden. And I said, yeah, well, things aren't great, but I've never been happier. So I touched upon that, and then I could lead with my heart and move forward. And almost 8 years later, I'm doing okay.
Are you saying happiness matters in what you do?
Yeah, it does.
Now, we've talked about the what. Tell us about the who. I mean, you talked a little bit about the folks who come to you for resume writing. You've touched on people in advanced elements of their career. Maybe it's someone who's starting out in the career who wants to, put a foot in their door. Maybe they're going to colleges. Who do you work with? Who are your customers? If I'm listening, I'm like, Sarah sounds fantastic. I want to become engaged, but I'm not sure if I'm the right fit for her. Tell us more about the individuals you work with.
Well, the individuals vary. Again, it could be someone who is just trying to get that first job. It could be someone who's trying to get the promotion. It could be someone who is making a career change. It could be someone who, hey, I've been out of work. I've been taking care of my family or, my parents or whatever, and they're getting back in to the job market. There are some people who are just, I've had it, I'm doing something totally different. So it really doesn't matter if age-wise. I think a lot of women come to me because they find themselves sandwiched, whether it's career-wise, family-wise, or what. And that is very much my brand and part of the screenwriting brand as well. But it's anyone who wants to make that change, and it's a positive change. So I don't say no. I don't say no.
I'm curious, since you've had such a interesting work history, let's call it. You're now doing this work. What's the most interesting thing that you've come across, in this most current part of your career that is like getting you like all excited about what you're doing?
I think, well, there's a couple ways to answer that question. I think first and foremost, it gets back to the happiness, because I have a routine and I move through the day, but I'm living what I had planned for. I've worked for this. I've worked for a move. I've worked for a change, and I've gone through a lot of change in my life. And to be able to see that come to fruition, that the hard work pays off, that is wonderful. But also just really starting to move forward with the creative force that I feel I was created to be, is to keep moving forward, keep telling those stories. And people say, oh, where do you get your ideas? That's like, ideas come to me. That's just, it's how do I put it out there? So I just love storytelling, and I feel that is what I do and where I find my most joy. And for me to, be starting screenplay number 5 and to actually have the time to do it as part of a regimented day, a disciplined day, that too will pay off. So yes, I'm happy now, but I truly feel that my best years are yet to come.
Well, that's a great ending right there, but we're not done yet.
We're not
done yet. I do have one more question. Then I'd like to hear final thoughts from Joseph and Laura has her final question, of course. But you're a PR person, so I'm very intrigued by how do you use your PR magic with helping people promote themselves in the work that you're doing with them? Because really part of transition is, putting yourself out there, and some people feel uncomfortable. You say, look at me, look how good I am. So how do you use your PR skills to help lift individuals up when you work with them?
And that's true, because a lot of people don't feel that comfort zone in the sense of this is what I do and this is what I do well. Even when writing resumes, it's like, oh, gee, I don't brag about myself. It's like, well, now it's time. So some of it is through the coaching. Some of it is through simple things like the breathing. But I often put on the reporter hat to be a better PR person. And that is, what are the questions can I anticipate? What, if something could go wrong, how can I be prepared just in case something goes crazy? And I try to utilize those skills in the PR world and to help a client that way.
No, that's a great
Prepare
answer.
for the worst, whatever you get is a gain.
Yeah, no, that's good. And then everything else is like, icing on the top of the cake.
Yeah.
So Joseph, any final thoughts for Sarah or any comments?
I'm just going to practice breathing the rest of the day. and I'll go to my happy place and it'll all be fine. No, it was interesting. Anyone that could write 5 screenplays, hats off to you. So, that's amazing.
I got a suitcase full of ideas, so that's just the beginning.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today and sharing some of your insights about transition and career and promoting yourself and moving forward. So it's great.
Thank you.
Laura, I'm going to tap it over to you for any final thoughts and then for you to ask the final question.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think it was great. I think it's a good reminder for all of us to take stock in what it is we identify with for ourselves, the work that we do and who we are as people, and understanding whether or not there's alignment there. So I appreciated the conversation. And in a few ways, I think we may have touched on this in the peripheral, but I'll ask you it in a literal sense because I truly am curious, Sarah. What is your why? Why do you do this work that you're doing right now?
It's joy. It's love. It's not about me. It's what I can do for others. I have been in communicating. I remember, being on the communications committee back in elementary school and doing posters. There's been something there that is a service. And I like working with people and I like the creative collaboration. So there's a lot of whys, but in the end, when someone says thank you, something as simple as when I was at WFSB and I would be at a school and the kids say, oh, can I have your autograph on your picture? And I would do that. And when with the kids, it's usually a message of like, stay in school, positive like that. A couple years later, when I was at Webster Bank in corporate communications, I got an email with that signed picture from a kid who said, I'm now going to college. Thanks for telling me to stay in school.
That's
so there's
awesome.
a why.
Yeah, I would say so for sure.
That's a great story. So Sarah, if individuals want to get in touch with you, to engage with you, what's the best way? We'll put everything else in the show notes.
Well, you can always get in touch with me on LinkedIn, but WashAshoreWriting.com is my website, and you can get in touch with me there. Sarah at WashAshore Writing.
Sarah, thanks for Yes, that's a good point. Sarah with an H. We really appreciate you spending time with us today on the Prime Life podcast. Laura, Joseph, great to have the band back together. And for our audience, like us, follow us, give us feedback. And we'll see you next time on another episode of the Prime Life podcast. Have a great day, everyone.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.